If you've ever been overwhelmed by workplace stress or longed for a more human, connected way to lead, this conversation is for you. My guest today is George Brooks, a globally respected thought leader, innovator, and entrepreneur with over 37 years of international consulting experience. George is well known for bringing mindfulness and emotional intelligence into the workplace, using practical tools that help people retrain their brains and regulate emotions, especially under pressure. He's a big thinker and a heart-led storyteller. His vision is to empower people to create positive, life-changing behavior shifts, to flip fear into motivation, to help people rebuild their human-based relational skills that are in decline due to digital communication. George, thank you so much for joining me today. We've had a little preamble off air, so we're kind of ready to get stuck in. Yeah, great to have you here.
Yeah, Nadine, great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Is there anything you want to add to that intro? I mean, it was pretty abridged. You've got a lot of
Yeah.
accolades that we could talk about for your 37 years of experience. Is there anything you want to add before we get stuck in?
Well, I'm a new grandfather.
Oh, yay! Congratulations.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I do think, we're at different stages in life. So I've done the gerbil wheel in business and, I've proven to be successful there. But the next segment, I'm doing the things we're going to talk about and trying to pass down a legacy to help others navigate what I found challenging. But I also have this great time in life to be with grandchildren, and so I'm loving that too.
Is that your first or have you got?
Second, my
Okay.
daughter, she has a 2.5-year-old and now a newborn. So yeah, it
Yeah,
changes
great.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah, very cool. Yes, very interesting that you were talking about the change of that kind of season of life because I'm in a that midlife season myself, and it is very interesting to kind of go to look back and witness that the hamster wheel thing that we kind of all of those expectations that we have of studying, getting the career, buying the house, having the family, and all of those things. And then you kind of get to a point, or I certainly have, where you kind of go, what is this actually all about?
exactly. Like
Purpose and vision start to become a bit more important.
exactly. It's why are we here? And
Mm,
I think those early years often for many people, for me, get driven by having to provide and being a
mm,
provider. And so I didn't come from much, it's a very poor upbringing, practically a single mom. And I think, from that, when you don't have much and you witness scarcity, you take on a different kind of mindset, entering, through college that you got to land and you got to succeed and you got to provide and you got to do what you need to do. And that was a big part of my life. And it was like super focused on that, I think, to the exclusion of many things. But as and then I witnessed a lot of people near me, that were like that as well. We all were in, I call it the gerbil wheel. But yeah, at some point in time, you have the benefit to think differently and reflect and see why we're here, and how can we help others. There's a friend of mine that uses a very familiar saying to protect and serve. And I
yeah,
think at the end of the day, we're here to protect and serve, and how can we serve?
yeah. And it's interesting as well how, well, you might have a different experience of this, but that perception of what is success, because we hear stories of people who are extremely successful when it comes to work and business and finances, but they feel unfulfilled. So yeah, that's kind of also an interesting thing that we start to observe, I think,
Yeah, so I'll,
and
I'll grab on.
question.
Yeah, I'll grab onto that. So this next season journey, it started with the question, as to why we're here. And I started just researching and reading and investigating, and kind of came to the conclusion that we're here to make other people happy. And the definition of happiness is making other people happy. And so now success, kind of takes on another look in that light, right? And it's really wild. I witness it and watch it, and I observe it as we go on. But I think there's like an underlying foundation when I see people do great things, that are considered success. It's often rooted in making other people happy or helping other people avoid suffering.
Mm.
And we do great things when we're motivated by that.
Yes, and it kind of brings in that idea of more interconnectedness as well, doesn't it? It's like we can't do it on our own. We need others to experience that truth, that happiness and success that you speak of.
Yeah, I was driving to go to a medical appointment, and I was the second car in at a red light. And this is a very simple example, but it's an example. There was a blind person crossing the street on a crosswalk in front of us, and he made it over the curb. He was kind of elderly and just kept going straight past the sidewalk into the grass and was about to walk into a tree. And somebody at the bus stop on the corner ran out and redirected the person and helped them, re-navigate and go the right way. And, that's a simple definition, but they were of different ages, different ethnic backgrounds. One was older, someone was younger, and you just jump to it and you do it. And, we're there to help. I thought, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool, and it is as simple as that. I think that that's a perfect example because we tend to overcomplicate things, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Uh, um, so what was there anything in your particular career where, like, you've had a successful 37-year career? Was there a point in your world, either personally or because you could see what was going on around you, that made you kind of shift your awareness?
Yeah, well, there's one thing that shifted my career, and and there's another thing that shifted my awareness. So let me answer the question you asked, shifted my awareness. So towards the last 12 years of my career, I became a leader internationally over many countries. And so there's hundreds and thousands of people underneath, working with you, part of your team. And what I witnessed, as a leader, one role when you lead a unit is, you're there to protect your employees, right? So there's a lot of different parts of a business, and everyone is coming at issues or challenges from, what their job is, whether it's to help a client or grow a geography or HR to enforce policies. My role was to grow our business, but also was to protect our people. And so with that, when you stay in touch with people, you have to manage all these escalations. And so I would spend big chunks of my day, walking people off the ledge. Emotionally, they, were getting caught up in so many things, usually around exclusion, not being invited to a conference, a meeting, a workshop, not participating in strategy development, or not being heard, or the improper teaming, within groups, and it's over and over. And so you're on the other end of a phone call trying to coach and help people, right? And it got to the point where my Saturday mornings, I would take my dog for a walk out in the woods and spend hours upon hours upon hours upon hours just down the line talking to people. And that's when it hit me. Now I wasn't a great master at navigating all the things they were navigating, but I kind of had enough. My wife is really seasoned, and people would always ask, like, what does Beth say? But I also had a good team around me that I'd bounce things off of and gave good advice. But then I started thinking I need to kind of learn more about, this emotional regulation, emotional management, and how to, detach and look at what's happening to you and why is it happening to you, and can you take a different path. So I would say it's all those escalations, and trying, and the amount of time I had to spend, especially when triangulation was involved, if there was three parties, so somebody goes behind someone's back to talk about something without including them, now you got one, two, three people to navigate. I mean, it's almost exhausting talking about it now, right? And so what if I said that, could we help people just avoid this? Like, if they can learn themselves to self-regulate, self-manage, become more aware and recognize the traps that their brain is sending them into, and they can start developing more regulation and management of these trigger points. um, wouldn't that be great? And that's when I started studying and looking into, different growth mechanisms.
Yeah, cool. Interesting that you say that the one of the key words I think you mentioned was exclusion. And I think that
Yeah,
this plays quite well into the work that you've done with how our brain functions. Um, yeah, that kind of idea of not being part of the tribe is very primal, isn't it? And
it,
you, from what you've referenced, it sounds like that's what people are experiencing or were experiencing in your workplace.
I would say that one comes top to mind. There's many other ones
Hmm.
too, but that one, I think it's probably one of the strongest reactions possible. That being excluded, is very hard, and um, it just hits real hard. It's a little different than, oh, there's things changing and I'm, unfamiliar with it and not comfortable. That's a little lighter than saying, oh, I'm excluded, right? And
Mm.
it's very strong. Yeah, and it's very deep. But the counterbalance to that is something, you mentioned, is, one of the techniques I saw is the concept of common humanity. So, in mindfulness, common humanity is, when we find an intersection where we have shared experiences or shared desires or shared beliefs with other people, there's a connection that's made, goes to inclusion.
Mm.
So our brain is wired, way back when, like you said, we had tribes, we had cliques, there were small communities, and people were always judging if somebody should be a part of the group. Are they a danger to the group, or could they help the group? And if you ever were expelled from the group, that meant almost certain death on being on your own, right? And it's like, so there's this concept of all eyes on me, being under judgment. And if you're excluded, it could, turn out bad. Well, guess what? Our brain is still processing that way. So if
Yeah.
you're not involved in something, you're thinking like, okay, I'm at risk, and fear kicks in, and it's a very strong feeling. Um, but to counteract that, which is really interesting, I did some studying under the Compassion Center at Emory University, and there's several techniques, common humanity, where if you search for, have you ever met somebody and your small talk is you find something in common,
Mm.
right? either the same sports team or where you grew up or where you know people or this, that. And as soon as you latch on to that, bam, you kind of connect with it and go with it. And that is one of the steps to go from it, like, exclusion to inclusion, where you go from the outer circle, I don't know you, to the inner circle, well, we share something in common. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And
You know,
so did you start learning about this stuff and then implementing it into your teams or your
yeah,
team?
so this is interesting. So I probably started studying this 4 years, the back end 4 years of my career. And um, there were techniques I definitely used and implemented indirectly, not as a formal practice, but part of coaching, part of, regulation management and things like that. But when I retired, I went all in. And I actually think that now, 4 years after I retired, if I was back in those roles, if success is defined as growth and, all the things that happened, I think we would have maybe done better, but
Mm.
even enjoyed it more. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I did use some of it. I learned a lot of it. I don't want to think that, hey, this guy was the perfect leader. No, I wasn't. Had great, advisors and, but I think there's a chance now after doing all these deep dives to kind of go back and even do it better. But one of the techniques I personally used, which was interesting, and deployed, was loving kindness. So if you think of being a business unit leader in a firm, and we were merging a lot of business units together to consolidate expertise, and people join the firm in those other units, and now you're saying, come here, we're doing this. And they were like, that's not why I joined, and it's a different role, my responsibilities are changing. I have to do a lot of things I'm uncomfortable with. And so even on paper it looked great, but in their heads they were having trouble with it. And some people, you know, try to undermine the strategy. And this too shall pass. Don't worry about it. Don't get too caught up in it. And I was catching wind of a lot of, just backlash and people say just don't worry about what George is trying to do. It's going to go away. You're left unaddressed, your automatic response is you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be angry, you're going to want to, you know, do something to that person to either like hit the exit button, like get on or get with it or get out of it, and some businesses do that. But my initial reaction was of loving kindness. There's a loving kindness meditation where you wish upon yourself and your loved ones or people you're in conflict with, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be peaceful, may you be prosperous, may you live in harmony with others. And as I did that, I would think about those people, that were undermining me. And I would send them loving kindness because I would envision them, being like in the bear trap and their leg caught
Mm.
and they're in pain and they're frustrated and they're kind of like lashing out. They're not in a good moment in their life. And that helped me emotionally, have a better day and deal with that situation. And then I had other techniques to use. But I'm just giving you an example of one that I kind of use quite a bit.
Yeah, that it just being able to tap into that in the moment, especially if something is, if it feels like there's conflict, um, it kind of switches on for you a different story, I guess, rather than getting
Yeah,
caught up in the conflict. But there's quite a skill, isn't there, in going, hang on a minute, I could react in the old way, or
yeah.
I can, use the new way? Is that just a like, is there anything that you did specifically to assist you with that, or was it because it was much more front of mind at that point in your career?
Yeah, it I think, and the way I develop these mind bursts is all of them are set triggers that we all universally through our subconscious respond the same way. And so that's why they had to go through that filter. I didn't, because if somebody had a difficult childhood, were picked on in gym class or things like that, no, these are ones that we're all gonna experience a trigger in the workplace situation, and we're all gonna respond the same way because our amygdala, and all these are amygdala driven, responds a certain way. Our brain tries to keep us safe, tries to protect us, tries to deal with things expediently, and tries to have fast answers, move us to pleasure. And so I think the trick is to just recognize the trigger, recognize what's happening, so then you can pause and move into a different response, right? And so because there's a difference between, if you study heavily in mindfulness, I think you'll get there. I'm trying to shortcut it real fast. Like, don't have a generic rule or understanding of what to do, and then you try to figure out when it applies. So, in my case, if new change is rolling out, or if you're anxious about being laid off, or you have to give a speech or a presentation, or you're going to miss a deadline, all these are triggers that you would say, oh, I remember that. I can
Mm.
go do a quick 10-minute kind of micro learning course on that. Here's what's happening to my brain. I'm about to miss the deadline. I'm freaking out. I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to go to who gave it to me and let them know, because then they're going to think all these negative things of me, of not being capable or whatever. And that's where our brain sends us. And then, the person giving the deadline probably, there's all kinds of biases that impact deadline making, which is really wild. We have an overestimation bias that things will get done fast and cheap. In some technology work plans, like 99% of the time, deadlines are missed because of these biases, and I call them all out. But it's really wild. So I kind of named them and said, this is when you need to do the switch. So, and I'm trying to capture the ones that are more prevalent than not.
Okay, yeah, so that was great. You've given us some really good examples of what people might be experiencing in the workplace, and I guess like uh, if you're in a corporate environment, you need you need efficiency, right? So
Oh my gosh.
people don't want to go on a mindfulness course, probably.
No, and that's you're spot on. That's exactly it. Because I've also learned, it's not, I know we're using the word mindfulness, but these solutions integrate. It starts with neuroscience, goes into behavioral psychology, emotional regulation, subconscious thought identification, growth mindset, moments that matter, mindfulness. All that is aggregated to solving this issue. So, and it's really wild, but that's, if I had one gift in the world, is I can integrate a lot of things and bring them together. So, you know, in what I found fascinating is these the things that I was doing a lot of mentoring on when I unpacked them and did the research. And it starts with neuroscience, because which part of the brain's being activated by the trigger. And so I went and did all these, and then I stepped back and looked at them, and my jaw dropped. I was like, oh my gosh, every single one of these situations activates your amygdala, which is your fight, flight, freeze part of your
Mm.
brain, or your reptilian brain. And what's really wild when you look at neuroscience, when your amygdala is activated, you have zero capability of thinking in your prefrontal cortex. Your amygdala is just driving immediate reactions and behaviors. And so when you find out someone went behind your back to your boss, you're like, oh my God, that's it. I'm after them. They're going to be sorry they did this, and that's what your brain's trying to protect you, right? And react. And so I started looking at what's the impact of being on your amygdala, and it's really wild. There's a lot of negative consequences of, um, you know, one of them is really important. It suppresses trust, which
Ah,
is really important in business. But I just recently was talking to a law firm, and I tried to see, so for a lawyer, right, who deals with clients that are usually at conflict, right?
yeah.
And or litigation, and or the pressures of selling and collecting and billing and mentoring and getting things right. You think of a lawyer as a pretty stressful situation. So best estimates, they're driving their day because of work. 30 to 40% of their day, they're driving from their fear center, fight, flight, freeze, because of all these. Now you take what's happening in the outside world and being connected to social media and reading the news and seeing the world events, and then you add family matters and financial matters and relational matters. Now you're up to 70 to 80% of your day is being driven off of your fear center. I don't know if
Mm.
people understand that. I didn't understand it until I did all this work. And so I went back and, I started thinking emotionally drawn to, are you making the best decisions? Are you becoming more fatigued? Are you having a hard time sleeping? Are you becoming more forgetful? Inability to concentrate? Are you moving more towards alcohol or other kinds of coping mechanisms, right? Are you neglecting self-care? And I just defined my entire existence in these roles, right?
Right.
Um, and then you got a statistic: 94% of American workers report feeling chronic stress at work. And the World Health Organization named workplace stress as a chronic disease.
Wow.
And I'm sitting here saying, okay, my little flag is saying, because we're all running around on fight, flight, freeze. We
Yeah.
don't know when to pause, when to calm the amygdala. And what's really wild, and the reason why you need neuroscience is because if you try coping mechanisms that are geared or designed for your prefrontal cortex or your thinking part of the brain, they won't work. The amygdala only comes based on suppressing the parasympathetic nervous
Mm.
system, which is freaking out. It's making you sweat, your heart rate, your pulmonary system, right? You can only use the one of the major ways is the sympathetic nervous system, and there's a very small handful of ways to activate that. So if you're at work, or like, I like this one, fear of flying. Fear of flying is amygdala based. Oh, planes are safe. Oh, look at the history of, you know, safety versus a car. And you can give all the stats in the world, but guess what? They're not hearing it. They're already in fight, flight, freeze. You got to get them to calm down. And there's a thing called exposure therapy that, one way to get around that flight, if it's amygdala driven, that fear is, you know, practice techniques to calm yourself while on the plane. But then there's an association. Oh, I flew, there was a good outcome.
Right.
I flew again, there was a good outcome. I
Mm.
flew again, there was a good outcome. Or I'm afraid of spiders. I touched a spider, nothing happened. And, after repeated exposure to something, you kind of get out of it, right? And and so I think we're going to continue being into chronic stress in the workplace and anxiety unless we're helping people identify what's happening to them, and in these triggers know what to do to calm down, and then from there take a pause and have a different response that your subconscious is telling you to do. It's just 1, 2, 3. What's happening? Calm, activate the brain. I can respond differently because in this situation, that subconscious response, fight, flight, freeze, is not going to serve me well. Thank you, brain. I'm okay.
Mm.
I'm going to treat this person with loving kindness. I'm going to calmly go to the boss and see what happened. And I'm going to calmly approach them and see what was so bad that they couldn't approach me, and maybe do it different in the future.
Yeah. And then from that experience, they get the proof that that was a great approach to do it. Like when you were talking about the flight, you fly, you're safe, you fly again, you're safe, and you build up that kind of proof that
Yep.
that is a safe experience,
Yep.
not a fearful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's so to go back to a prior question, there was you spent 37 years in a very, high performing, high pressure kind of work environment, and an ownership model of being in a partnership, which brings on a lot more fiscal responsibility because you have no outside money investments, no loans. And so you're in that and you're witnessing all this happening, and you're trying to help people and trying to help yourself and learn what's going on, and then have that ability to get deep into mindfulness meditation. And then I also got certified in compassion training. And with that, that's years of study and tests. And, you have to go through a lot of training. And, then you start becoming curious and you start like reading more and more, connecting more and more dots. So what I thought, and again, this is post career, we talked about the next stage, is can I take all this knowledge and bridge it to business?
Mm.
Because business people don't know this bucket, and most people deep in this bucket never worked in business.
Yeah.
And I can immediately see this connection here. And I said, hey, we can do things different. Um, but one thing I ran into then, if this all seems to make sense, is are people motivated to help themselves?
Mm.
So you're smiling. What do you think about that? Like, I mean, and you do a lot of training and things, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like, see, I think motivation, you know, obviously there's motivation if you go so far and there's so much accumulated anxiety and you hit a wall and you can't perform, right? But we don't want that as the motivation. But what are your thoughts? I'm just curious.
Oh gosh, it's such a tricky one. Like to a degree, it can be quite person dependent, I think.
Yeah,
Probably in an environment like you were in, where you're a leader, if you if you integrate it as like as a kind of like a prerequisite or an expectation that this is part of the culture of the workplace, I think that that would probably um, have a strong influence. But yeah, and I actually did a little bit of work and coaching with habits and behaviour, and really love James Clear, which you've probably heard of James Clear with
yeah.
Atomic Habits, and that
Oh
kind
yeah.
of idea of that those small behavioural things that we can change. But when it comes to mindfulness and that conflict resolution and reducing anxiety and reducing stress, it's a like you've said, it's an epidemic. So something has to give because people can't go on living in that way, and we see that through issues with health, right?
Yeah.
Most chronic disease is the main contributor is stress, and it's like that. It's the one thing that people kind of go, oh, well, you know, if they're not stressed, then they're not working hard enough, and so it's changing that whole perception, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
But we definitely
I like
see we
that.
work with people. We worked in Sydney. We've moved out into the countryside now. Um, when we worked in Sydney, we were coaching a lot of professionals, you know, corporate, and stress is a massive, yeah, just this thing. Um, Causes heart disease, it causes high blood pressure, it causes, you know, it contributes to diabetes, poor sleep, and then, you know, you've mentioned some of these things already. Yeah, so I think you're at the forefront of this really for trying to change the culture of business.
Yeah, let me thank you. So there's a couple of modules. So I had a meeting with the CEO of a health system, and the topic was bringing compassion into the workplace. And there's something like 80 studies. There's a book called Compassionomics, and 80 studies of the value of compassion in healthcare, and getting physicians and healthcare workers to understand and exhibit compassion in the delivery of care, and the impact it has on the patients, on their outcomes as well.
Mm,
Improved medical outcomes, improved patient experience, improved physician experience as well. And fewer lawsuits, and like it's just a dream come true. And then physicians said, well, we don't have time.
mm,
And they did a study, and they said, you know ask allowing a patient to ask a question and answer it, usually goes no more than 6 questions and takes 5.5 minutes. And you leave the patient saying, we're in this together.
mm,
Very simple, change in mindset perspectives. But that CEO had a great question. So he said, how am I going to get our staff to practice this,
mm,
to develop these new skills and habits? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, it was a twofold question. One was, we know it's important to eat fruit and vegetables. We know it's important to exercise. We know it's important to floss. But, we kind of like aren't all doing that. And and then how do you find the time to do it? Carve out
mm,
the time. That's the question. So I went. That gets me going. So I unpack. How do you create a sustainable habit? And whether it's to practice meditation or practice these mind bursts, which aren't most important thing is not just meditating. The most important thing in in this algorithm to create these new habits is to take a different perspective, to do that mind shift, choose differently, and experience a different emotion and behavior, right? That's the outcome. And you have to take action. Once you take action, that's a different action, and you experience a different emotion, then you have a shift. It's not reading about it. Okay. So put all that there. So now, how do you get people to do these things? What are these
mm,
things? Well, to do the fruits and vegetables, to take care of your health, to stay on diets, practice, these mind bursts, quit drinking is another one, right? And so start with atomic habits, kind of go through everything, take all this other stuff I'm learning along the way. And so I put together a module, how to create sustainable habits.
mm,
But what everyone wants the shortcut answer. And if you remember atomic habits, there's a lot of steps, and there's all these, reinforcement sustaining. It's like a lot there. And I'm like, okay. and nothing wrong with that. I get that, that's there. But I found, is there a possibility in some circumstances to get somewhere quick? Um, I put together something called a motivation matrix. So it's just 4 boxes: top left to make yourself happy, bottom left for you to avoid suffering, bottom right to make others happy, bottom right to help others cease suffering, to stop the suffering of others. I'm happy, I'm not suffering, I make other people happy, I stop the suffering of others. And so then I took alcohol consumption.
Uh-huh.
And I found, what would motivate you to quit drinking alcohol? Well, do you want to feel better, not be hungover? Top left. Bottom left to avoid hangovers. Top left to avoid embarrassing situations. Um, you know, but could you make others happy, or could you help others avoid suffering? What I found is that bottom right quadrant of, if your drinking causes others to suffer, causes other people to be on eggshells, causes other people to be disappointed in you, or your behavior changes such that they're uncomfortable. And if those people are someone you care about, is that enough motivation to just stop? And it was really wild. In the module, I list about 12 famous people who I looked up, all cited that as their reason for quitting alcohol immediately.
Wow.
Immediately. Yeah. So there's I'm not going to start naming names on the podcast, but it's in my mind burst. There's one famous actor, who really had a spell where, was always in the news about being out there and being crazy, and um, drove his daughter to school in the mornings, and one morning couldn't drive because he had a couple of vodkas and had a driver drive, and he sat in the passenger seat, she was in the back, and she was so disappointed and said, "Oh, Dad, like, not again."
Mm.
He quit that moment, has never drank since.
Wow.
And this is like 30 to 40 years of partying. And there was one after another, all saying that my 2 young boys, my family, my career, my this, my that. And, I think, so when it comes to mindsets and motivation, and it comes back to why we exist and what drives us, when we talk about being happy, making other people happy, we make other people happy by helping them, avoid suffering or relieve their suffering. Now, especially, I think, if you grew up in a situation where somebody drank in your family and you were the recipient of the person, you were suffering because of their behavior, you were humiliated, um, and now you're doing it to somebody else.
Mm.
That's super powerful. It'll, like, you're gonna say, am I just being someone else over again here? And so I'm not saying, I'm sure it's way more complicated than that. There's probably all kinds of substance abuse people out there,
But that's worked for you.
yeah, and it's out there. And I just think that our minds could be very powerful, and if we tap into the right motivations, we can change our behaviors, and it could be pretty dramatic and quick.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I love that, you're offering a perspective that's worked for you and that you're sharing that. Um, uh, and there are so many tools, aren't there? So, the James Clear might work for one person, the habit stacking sort of thing, but might not work for the next. The motivation matrix may work for one person, but it's like
Yep.
you can cherry pick, right? As well. You, um, Okay, so you've mentioned mind bursts, and this is your gift to uh, the world right now. Can you talk us through a bit more specifically what mind bursts are? You've sort of discussed, what's driven you to create this is it a program or
Yeah, so the company, I started is called Simpatico
Mhm.
Advisory. And, on the website, Simpatico Advisory, it directs you to a section called Mind Bursts. And what these are micro learning solutions. So in 10 minutes time, I think you can go into a mind burst and understand what's happening to you, why it's happening, and what you can do about it. There'll be a meditation that will do the amygdala calming, and there quickly will be in recommended actions to take those actions to choose a different behavior, a different response with a different emotion. And it encourages you to reflect upon, well, how did that work for me? I just experienced the shift. And then there's a cheat sheet in there, an infographic that summarizes the whole teaching on one piece of paper, so you can just put it on the edge of your desk.
okay.
So it's an algorithm I created. I already went through all the details of neurology and that, but the idea was, can you bring known triggers with an integrated expedient response minutes? And so if you use it, so I'm experiencing layoff anxiety. I'm gonna probably take 10 minutes to understand the positioning of it, what's happening and why. But then the practice thereafter, when you go back, it's probably the practice is about 10 minutes in itself too. You don't need to do the first 10 anymore. And it will help you calm down and take some good actions, which are different than the actions that your subconscious would lead you to do, right? And find a better outcome. And same thing if you have to give a presentation or do a public speaking, um, or you have trouble with deadlines. These are all there. So micro learning solutions help you through it. They're all free, right? You can just access them, use them. So if you just use them once, it's okay. It helped you. It de-escalated. But if you so choose, you can continue to practice it for a week or two,
Hmm.
and then you have the ability to create a habit
Yeah.
through the repetition. And so it's inviting you to habit change. But I understand in today's society, you know, um, maybe not everyone's into habit changes, like we said, or we just want that quick fix. But so it could serve either way. Maybe you don't do a lot of speeches, or you don't have to give a lot of presentations. You can use it once. But if you do a lot, or you're newly promoted and you need to learn to do a lot, then this will help you, bypass that anxiety. Maybe after 2 weeks of practice, you no longer will be fearful of making a presentation, and you'll know how to craft and create the presentation, how to prepare for delivery, and what to do on stage when your mind starts playing games on you.
Right.
Yeah. So I think they're pretty cool. I wish I had these. Um, I learned a lot building them, like I said, after the fact. Um, and so we created three categories: better me,
Yeah.
better we, and better sales. And better me is more around triggers that are intrapersonal, that we start ruminating and doing cascading thoughts.
Sure.
Um, better we are the kinds of things at work that are relational between people.
Yeah.
And better sales is the category of its own. When I unpack that, that was a request to build those. It was amazing to me how this algorithm worked in that space as well. And on better sales, there's two big components. One is we're often hesitant or reluctant in the sales process. We get a big goal, fear comes in, and we kind of defer action. We keep putting things off. We do other things than get to what we need to do. Maybe we don't follow up. We don't reach out. We don't cold call. We don't write that email. I need to get back to someone. Well, I found that what our brain is doing is trying to protect us because there's these things called anticipatory anxieties. There's the possibility of failure.
Yeah.
There's the possibility of rejection. And, we have a correlation between our self-esteem and achievement. And if there's the possibility we won't achieve, our brain doesn't want our self-esteem to get hit. And these are the kinds of things that are causing this hesitation.
Mm.
I found that wild because I'm like, who hasn't been brought up, between linking self-esteem to achievement? And that's
Totally. Yeah.
maybe that's okay, right? But you also can't have the yo-yo go down when you don't achieve to lose your self-esteem. Meaning you got to stay steady Eddie and you got to find other reasons for self-worth. You are more than your sales score.
Yeah.
Scotty Scheffler's wife, he's the world's number one golfer. She said, Scotty, you are a great man. And in the eyes of God, you are more than your golf score.
Yeah.
And we got to anchor in on these things. And so I found, it's not all salespeople hesitate. I'm sure seasoned people, maybe people new to it, or certain people don't understand. I didn't understand that. I found out that, yeah, I was guilty of all that. And then, but you find different ways to power through. And then the second group in sales, which I found and this is unique and different, but if you need to develop a trusted relationship with somebody, a meaningful relationship, an authentic relationship, what are the skills or what has to happen between two people for that to happen? And I broke it down into 4 components. First is you got to be able to pay attention to someone. Second is you need to practice active listening or mindful listening. Third, you need to be able to exhibit empathy. And fourth, you need to truly care to help that person solve their pain point.
Mm.
Now let's go backwards. Where is the human brain today in those 4 buckets? So, Nadine, what do you think our attention span is as a human?
Oh, I definitely, I don't know. I don't think it's very good. And I definitely have experienced in my lifetime a decrease in my attention.
Yeah. So I don't mean to put you on a
And I
point,
know
but
that it's because of technology, right?
yeah, exactly. So our attention span is down on average to 5.8 seconds.
Wow.
A goldfish has an attention span higher than ours.
I shouldn't laugh, but that's a great comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
pretty scary.
do you have a dog?
Yeah, she's got a
Okay.
better attention span than me.
She's probably got an attention span of about 3.5 minutes.
Wow.
And if you're trying to train a dog, they'll pay attention.
Yeah.
So if you're entering into a relationship, you're in a meeting, you got maybe a group of people. If if your mind starts to wander and you're thinking, oh, when I come up, what am I going to say? I'm
Mm,
thinking to respond. I'm like, oh, what did that guy just? Oh my God, what the hell? And what's this? And look at them. You're not dialed in. And do you think someone on the other end knows you're not paying attention? I mean, that's the
mm,
very first thing that turns somebody off is to not pay attention. The very first thing you can do, probably one of the most important things you can ever do to another human being, is to give your full and undivided attention,
yeah.
right? Your partner walks in, shut the computer down, put the phone down, eye to eye contact, pay attention.
Mm,
Okay. Second thing in the relationship is mindful listening or active listening. Not just listening to their words, but how they're saying it, their emotions. Listen with your mind, your heart, and your stomach. And the most powerful thing you can do when you're listening empathetically is, to say to someone, wow, you must feel proud, or you must feel scared, or
mm,
when you acknowledge their emotions, it takes things to a totally different level. Um, so
yeah.
we're into paying attention, mindful listening, empathy, feeling what they're feeling, saying it, and then fourth, you could sell to just deliver. You could sell to meet a quota. I mean, most sales programs tell you to understand their pain points, but are you understanding their pain points to just get something there? Or
Mm,
you understand their pain points because you really care in that motivation matrix to alleviate their suffering? There's a little bit of a difference there.
mm,
And, when I saw the strongest relationships, we hired so many people and clients followed them. It's because they've been through war together and they shared a common experience and they developed, that tightness of relationship due to solving, whatever they had to solve together. And they had trust in each other. That's different than, oh, you were there, you had a great thing and it worked. So I try to, break it down into those components, um, about truly enhancing relational capabilities. And then there's another bucket, which I didn't even know, and I was fairly good at selling, that something like 95% of sales are based off of a person's emotions
right. Yeah. How, yeah.
or business's emotions. So I put together a program that says, listen for these cues, by the person, like a person may want a promotion, a person may desire to know the next innovative thing, a person may be super risk adverse, but then the company may be this. Understand their emotional drivers and then frame what you have to help solve those emotional needs. Big
Yeah.
section on that. Third section is just asking difficult questions. Our brain stops us, from certain questions around what's the decision making process? Who are the decision makers? What kind of budget do you have? Who else is competing? We don't, maybe when you're seasoned or further along, you get comfortable with that, but there's we tend to shy away from that. So there's cognitive reframing to help you
Mm,
develop, the ability to ask these questions, and then managing self-doubt. So that's the last sales one, the second one in that. So yeah, these are better me, better we, better sales. I think these can only help. Some people say, oh, this is all bread and butter, and maybe it is, but for some people, like even for me, throughout my career, it wasn't bread and butter for me. I didn't know this. Some people know pieces of this, but it's all there in one spot.
you put it in
It's
one.
all there
Yeah.
for you. Yeah.
Amazing. I think the first three things that you said for the sales, listening, empathy, and like reaffirming how
Yeah.
someone's feeling, um, they're really good parenting tips too. Put your phone down, close your computer,
Yeah. Oh,
listen,
yeah.
affirm what the child's saying. Then you can get what you need from your from your child. Usually,
As you're saying that, I'm thinking like, yep, I was a terrible parent. Did I really
uh,
try to understand where my kid's coming from? And they're in that fast paced. Yeah, I wasn't. My EQ, emotional intelligence, probably at that stage in life wasn't there. These are things. Like I wish you could put on the people. Like but
mm,
you're right. These aren't um just for work. They're you're whatever you're you know, you gotta like I don't know how many times you have a group of friends. I hear stories. People say we got, people meet every Wednesday. There might be a church group, and there's like 12 people meeting, and then somehow people find out there's the core four, and they're off doing something else. And there we go again. We got exclusion, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, right,
it happens in all facets in life,
yeah.
right? And there's another module I did, and it's not work related, but it carries over into work. Is creating sustainable habits around credit card debt. And
Sorry, I
if you
missed out of create sustainable
credit
habits. Oh, credit
around
card debt. Yes, I saw that one on there. Yeah.
this was another fascinating one, and I do think the stress of debt carries over and impacts your performance indirectly, right? So
Mm.
put it in there anyway. It's one that came up and people asked me about. This is another, I think, for me, eye opener, super fascinating. Um, I broke it down in asking people where you spend, and there's that automatic I'm spending. Like you're not sitting there rationalizing it.
Mm.
It's came up with three categories and see if they hit home, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Um, Number one, it's been a long day. I'm tired. Let's order out. Let's eat out. Does
Hmm.
that hit home?
Yeah, we don't do it very often, but we would have when we lived in the city. Yeah.
It depends what you have access to. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're rural. The second one is I deserve it. You justify a spend.
Yep.
The third one is, and you don't need to do this one a lot, but when you do it, you'll be paying for it a long time. I call it the luxury upgrade. So can't afford it,
Mm.
um, but let's just travel first class. Let's stay at a better hotel. Let's get the Audi instead of the BMW. Um, these luxury upgrades, you know, it's something. You don't buy a car a lot, you don't travel a lot, but when you do, you'll be paying for that for 4 years.
Mm.
it's a big one. It's
Yeah.
not like these hundred little eat outs,
Yeah. Yeah.
or the dozens that justify. It's few, but they're the big ones. And then you stack these three up, all of a sudden, so in
You
in
can
the
get in a lot of trouble,
States,
right?
well, 83% of people have extended credit card issues.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
83%.
big problem.
Yeah. And a lot of economies are running off this.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, not to bore you, I broke them down. And so I went back to the neuroscience. What's happening in your brain? It's been a long day. I'm tired.
Mm.
Let's eat out. Well, what did I say our brain's default mechanism is, right? It's ease, comfort, immediate pleasure and you experience an emotional reward.
Mm.
So if you don't stop and think, like I'm saying now, here's a trigger. And we got that little infographic, the one pager, of what's happening in your brain. There's these cognitive biases that your brain is relying on to respond to that thought. And you're going out and or you're having a couple of cocktails, right? And you're spending. And if I almost feel like you need to take the infographic and put it on your garage door or by your phone and just stop and think about it. Like, am I doing this? It's okay. I'm not saying don't do it, but you're doing it all the time. All of a sudden, this eating out's adding up, especially nowadays, right, on the bill. But explain the cognitive biases that are driving these decisions. If you don't intervene, there's 100% chance you're going to eat out. You have no choice. It's going to happen. Your brain takes you there. So if you're not like stopping, okay. Second one, the luxury upgrade is even worse because I name about 10 unconscious biases that come into play. And it's very clear to me after I listed all those out that every advertiser in the world knows about those 10 cognitive biases. And everything we hear and see is like getting at your biases. And you see this famous person looking good, being there, friends posting,
You need it. You need it. You need to keep up,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and everything's there. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a perfect map. They're just playing with your brain. They know it. And you have like almost no defense mechanism if you don't opt out.
Mm.
It's just going to happen. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing with justifying it too. There's very similar biases, but I lay them all out. It's about 17 biases between those three. This is what 95% of our decisions during the day are made by our unconscious mind, and that's necessary because we can't make all these decisions, right? Um, but where does the unconscious mind lead you, and does it serve you well? And the unconscious mind has all these shortcuts called biases. They take these shortcuts, and they're going to make you feel good. They're going to bring it fast, and you got
Yeah.
to like know when to kind of jump in. And I thought that was kind of fascinating for me too.
Mm.
I don't know if I don't think we ever really got into a lot of credit card debt along our journey, but I know there's a lot of people that have, and I think these things, just being aware of it, and maybe jumping in. I don't know. I'm not saying these are amygdala driven, but they are subconscious driven.
Yeah.
With the biases, and then bam, you're
It's a
you're
behavioral thing as well, isn't it? If you think back to, like, I was just thinking about when we used to get paid. I used to get a pay packet with the cash in it, right? Back in the
oh wow.
day. Uh, um, and so you have your cash, and when it's gone, it's gone. But you don't see that when you've got a credit card. It's just a piece of plastic, and you can just kind of you don't have that emotional attachment to, like, I've worked, I've earned this amount of money, or even going to a machine, a teller machine, to withdraw cash. You don't really do it anymore. So you don't have that
Oh,
kind of connection, or like, of the separating yourself from that money. It's just a habitual, yeah, instant gratification thing, playing on that part of
yeah,
our
and
brain.
yeah, exactly. And then you mentioned behavior and the ease. So
Mm, yeah.
I was at a restaurant with my wife, and I have this wallet where people can't pick up your magnetic strip. It's just a little like compartment, little suitcase wallet. You open it up and
Okay.
closes, and you put your credit cards in there. And the person serving the table saw the wallet with the credit cards and thought, wow, that'd be pretty cool to have, but I don't really carry a wallet. It's okay. Um, They use Apple
Their
Pay.
phone. Yeah.
Forget the money thing, like you just said. You're like, yeah, that this phone's got like unlimited, like it's buying all this stuff.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah,
even
complete
easier.
disconnection from, the fact that you've had to put in hours and hours of work to earn the money or not.
Yeah, yeah,
We
fascinating. So
have,
yes,
yes, well, so you've got all bases covered with Mindburst. We've kind of just tipped over our hour, and I'm conscious of our time together coming to a close. But so we're going to send the listeners to Simpatico, the website with Mindburst. We've also got a guest directory, so we'll put your profile in there with all of the links so that people can access it easily and find out more about what you're doing. As we close, if you could leave our audience with like one thought about living and leading with more heart, what would it be?
well, I have two thoughts. If I had to give one thought from all the mind bursts,
Mhm.
is when you're under stress, if you're not in immediate physical harm or danger, do the opposite of what you're thinking.
Okay.
Do the opposite. Because the bottom line is in every one of these, the recommendation is to just do the opposite.
Okay.
Crazy thing, but I started doing that. And like whenever you're flustered and this, that, just do the opposite. Like,
Okay.
you're so that I mean that actually in Seinfeld, there's an episode where George did the opposite, became wildly successful, and it was really kind of a play on this. Um, but I think on what I learned from the heart is, and maybe there's another episode to talk about this, but where this took me is like the next chapter, even after this, is the more we try to control and create or dictate and get locked on to things, the more we're going to be disappointed and frustrated. And the more we're open, you know, to the world or the universe or God sending us answers versus us trying to create them, and creating that open path, to use these mind bursts to get the noise out,
Mm.
to clear our minds and to be present. And while we're present, we can then be more receptive to guidance that would be forthcoming. And I think when people get into this presence, there's miracles where bodies are healed,
Mm.
self-healed, right? And there's miracles on you know relationships being solved, or finding the right direction. And I think what we created is so much noise, it blocked our ability to kind of go in that direction. And so this is just one of the tools, many of these, to become present. But there's even something better on the other side of fear, which is this opportunity, to live a good whole life.
Love it. That's beautiful. What a great way to end. George, thank you so much for joining me today. I've loved our conversation. Yeah, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.